Subscribe to Dr. Nightmare Channel now.
Story 1: The Hollow Deep. Summer has a way of luring people into the wild. For some, it's the heat of the sun on their skin. For others, it's the promise of quiet, the escape from endless noise and screens. For Tyler and his friends, it was the allure of the deep woods, of renting a hidden cabin by a lake far removed from the city's suffocating weight. They had found the place through a small rental ad. No glossy photos, no website, just a short listing. Cabin by Hollow Lake. Private, remote, available by week. The name alone had hooked them. Hollow Lake. It sounded eerie, yes, but also peaceful, secretive. Exactly what they thought they wanted. The trip began with laughter. Tyler drove, his girlfriend Jenna beside him, and in the back seat were their friends Marcus and Ellie. They played old road trip songs, cracked jokes, and stopped for fast food on the way. For hours the highway rolled out in front of them, long stretches of asphalt flanked by farmland and forest. But the deeper they went, the more the world seemed to close in. The road narrowed, twisting into the woods. Tall pines crowded the car on both sides, their shadows cutting across the windshield. The GPS signal cut out miles ago. No signs, no other cars, just miles and miles of trees. When they finally found the turnoff, it was barely marked. A dirt path half hidden by weeds, the wood sign hanging by one chain, letters so faded it was hard to read. Hollow Lake Ard. The cabin sat at the end of that road, perched on the edge of still, black water. The lake stretched wide, its surface unmoving like glass. The air smelled damp, heavy with pine and something faintly metallic, like rust. "This is perfect," Jenna said, forcing cheer into her voice. She carried her bag inside, though her eyes kept flicking to the water. The cabin was old but solid. A single floor, 2 bedrooms, wood-paneled walls. Dust lay thick across the windowsills. In the corner of the main room stood a stone fireplace, cold and unused for what looked like years. They unpacked, cooked dinner, and drank until laughter filled the cabin again. For a while, it felt normal. But when night came, the lake grew louder. Lying in bed, Tyler heard it first. A hollow sound, like something striking wood deep beneath the water. Not waves, not wind. A knock. Rhythmic. Slow. He sat up, listening. The others were asleep. Outside, the air was still, yet the sound went on, muffled but steady, like fists pounding on the underside of the lake. The next morning, Marcus went out early to fish. Tyler joined him after a while, though he noticed Marcus standing strangely at the dock, staring at the water. "See that?" Marcus whispered, pointing. The water rippled, though there was no wind, and for a second, Tyler swore he saw something beneath the surface, pale, just under the glassy skin of the lake. A hand. He blinked, and it was gone. "Probably a fish," Tyler muttered. but his voice lacked conviction. That night, the knocking came again, louder this time. Everyone heard it. Ellie sat up in bed, clutching her blanket. "It sounds like it's coming from under the cabin," she whispered. They went outside, flashlights slicing through the dark. The lake stretched silent, unmoving, reflecting the moon like a black mirror. The knocking stopped the moment they stepped outside. But Jenna froze. "Do you hear that?" It wasn't knocking anymore. It was whispering. Voices carried across the lake, faint but unmistakable. Dozens of them, layered together. Some low, some high, some almost childlike. The words weren't clear, but the tone was unmistakable. Pleading. Marcus dropped his flashlight. It rolled to the edge of the dock before falling into the water with a hiss. For a second, the beam shone beneath the surface, and there they were. Faces, dozens of pale faces drifting just below, eyes open, mouths moving soundlessly. The light flickered out. They ran back into the cabin and locked the door. None of them slept. The next day, they tried to leave. They packed the car, threw their bags inside, and drove back up the dirt road. But after a half hour, the trees opened to reveal the lake again. The cabin sat waiting, smoke curling faintly from its chimney. Jenna screamed. Tyler slammed the brakes. They hadn't turned, they hadn't looped, but the road had brought them back. Panic set in. Marcus punched the steering wheel, swearing. Ellie sobbed. They got out, checked the road, walked half a mile, 2. Always the same. The woods stretched on, shifting, leading them back to Hollow Lake. The forest didn't want to let them go. That night, the whispers grew clearer. Tyler pressed his ear to the floorboards, heart pounding. The voices were beneath the cabin now, rising through the wood. Join us. Join us in the hollow deep. The floorboards shuddered as though something was pressing up against them. Suddenly, water gushed between the cracks, black and freezing. The cabin groaned as the lake began to rise, swallowing it whole. They scrambled onto the furniture as water surged up to their waists, then their chests. Tyler screamed Jenna's name as she slipped under. He dove after her, but the water was endless, deeper than it should have been, pulling him down into darkness. In that darkness, faces surrounded him, white, bloated, mouths open in endless screams. Hands clutched his arms, dragging him lower, deeper. When Tyler woke, he was alone. The cabin was dry again. The others were gone. Their bags, their shoes, everything gone. Only the lake remained, black and still. He stumbled outside, calling their names until his throat was raw. No answer. At the water's edge, he saw something move. Jenna, standing waist deep in the lake, her hair drifting around her face. "Come back," she whispered. Her voice was hollow, layered, as though dozens of voices spoke through her. When Tyler ran forward, she sank beneath the surface without a ripple. He never left Hollow Lake. Locals say the cabin still stands. They say travelers sometimes find it by accident when the road takes them where it shouldn't. And those who stay the night Hear the knocking, the sound of all the drowned waiting for more. They call it the hollow deep, because once it takes you, there is no surface, only the deep.
Story 2: The Motel by the Highway. Summer nights on the highway are never as empty as they feel. The road stretches for miles, black asphalt glowing under headlights, but there's always something out there. Animals watching from the tree line, trucks thundering past like beasts in the dark, and sometimes a feeling that you're not as alone as you think. That was the atmosphere pressing down on Daniel and his younger sister Claire as they drove through the endless back roads of the Midwest in late July. They had been on the road all day, the map app on Daniel's phone blinking uncertainly, cutting in and out the farther they drove from the main interstate. They were supposed to reach their cousin's house before nightfall, but delays piled up. A flat tire, construction detours, then heavy rain that turned the sky into a sheet of gray and erased the last of the daylight. By the time Daniel realized they weren't going to make it, they were running low on gas, nerves fraying. Claire kept checking her phone, but hadn't had service for nearly an hour. When the neon sign appeared through the trees, flickering faintly in the dark, it felt like salvation. Silver Pines Motel. The letters buzzed in faded red, one of the bulbs blown, so it read SILVR Pines. A single story line of rooms stretched along the lot, their windows dim, curtains drawn. The office sat at the end, its door propped open, a faint glow spilling out. Claire frowned. This place looks abandoned. Daniel pulled into the lot anyway. It's a bed and 4 walls. That's all I care about. The gravel crunched under the tires as he parked near the office. The air outside was heavy with the smell of wet asphalt and pine sap. Somewhere in the distance, frogs croaked, but there's always something out there. Animals watching from the tree line. Trucks thundering past like beasts in the dark. And sometimes a feeling that you're not as alone as you think. That was the atmosphere pressing down on Daniel and his younger sister Claire as they drove through the endless back roads of the Midwest in late July. They had been on the road all day, the map app on Daniel's phone blinking uncertainly, cutting in and out the farther they drove from the main interstate. They were supposed to reach their cousin's house before nightfall, but delays piled up. A flat tire, construction detours, then heavy rain that turned the sky into a sheet of gray and erased the last of the daylight. By the time Daniel realized they weren't going to make it, they were running low on gas, nerves fraying. Claire kept checking her phone, but hadn't had service for nearly an hour. When the neon sign appeared through the trees, flickering faintly in the dark, it felt like salvation. Silver Pines Motel. The letters buzzed in faded red, one of the bulbs blown, so it read SILVR Pines. A single storyline of rooms stretched along the lot, their windows dim, curtains drawn. The office sat at the end, its door propped open, a faint glow spilling out. Claire frowned. This place looks abandoned. Daniel pulled into the lot anyway. It's a bed and 4 walls. That's all I care about. The gravel crunched under the tires as he parked near the office. The air outside was heavy with the smell of wet asphalt and pine sap. Somewhere in the distance, frogs croaked, but otherwise the night was silent. Too silent. Inside the office, an old ceiling fan spun lazily overhead. The clerk sat behind the counter, a pale man in his 50s with slicked back hair and watery eyes. He looked up when they entered, but his expression didn't change. 2 beds? He asked, flatly, as if he'd been expecting them. Daniel nodded, uneasy. Yeah, just for the night. The man slid a key across the counter. The tag read, Room 6. Cash only, $75. Daniel handed over the bills without argument, eager to be done. As they left the office, the clerk added, Don't leave the room after midnight. Highways dangerous this time of night. Daniel glanced back, but the man was already staring at the ledger again, pen scratching slowly. Room 6 smelled faintly of mildew. The carpet was a stained beige, the curtains a sickly yellow. The beds looked clean enough, though the mattresses sagged in the middle. A TV sat on the dresser, an old box model with a remote that only half worked. Claire dropped her bag with a sigh. This place is creepy. Daniel forced a laugh. It's one night. We'll crash, get gas in the morning, and be gone. But even as he spoke, he felt it too. That strange weight in the air, as if the room itself was watching them. They tried the TV. Static. Flipped through every channel, but nothing came in. Outside, the rain started again, tapping softly against the window. By 11, they turned off the lights and tried to sleep. That was when the sounds began. At first, Daniel thought it was the rain, a faint tapping, like water dripping steadily. But as he listened, he realized it wasn't outside. It was in the hallway. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, stopping just outside our door. He held his breath, staring at the shadow under the frame. It lingered, unmoving. Then, faintly, something scraped against the door. Nails or fingertips. Claire sat up, whispering, Daniel. He put a finger to his lips. The shadow finally moved on, the footsteps receding down the hall. Daniel exhaled shakily. Probably another guest, he muttered, though he knew the parking lot had been empty when they pulled in. At midnight, Daniel woke to the sound of the TV turning on by itself. The static hiss filled the room, bathing it in flickering light. He sat up, heart pounding. Claire was still asleep, her face pale in the glow. On the screen, the static began to shift. For a moment, he thought he saw an image forming. A hallway. Our hallway.
A hand, pale, skeletal, sliding slowly down the pane. Then another and another. Claire whimpered, There's more than one! The glass began to creak under the weight of them. Daniel pulled her back, heart hammering. The whispers grew louder, urgent now, pressing in from every side. Something moved in the walls, the ceiling, the floor. The entire room vibrated with the sound of voices just out of reach. And then, in the midst of it all, the phone rang. The room's old rotary phone, sitting on the nightstand, shrilled loudly. Daniel stared at it, frozen. The static
went silent. The ringing continued, relentless. Finally, with shaking hands, he picked it up. Static filled his ear, then a voice, flat and calm. "You shouldn't have stopped here." The line went dead. The whispers exploded back, louder than ever, drowning out thought. Daniel and Claire huddled together on the bed, covering their ears as shadows writhed across the walls. And then, just as suddenly, silence fell. The room was still. The window was clear. The door was untouched. Morning light filtered weakly through the curtains. When they went to the office to check out, the clerk wasn't there. The counter was dusty, the ledger blank. A thin layer of cobwebs covered the chair. Daniel and Claire stared at each other, shaken. Without a word, they left the key on the counter and fled to their car. The highway stretched empty as they drove away, the motel shrinking in the rear view until it vanished behind the trees. They never spoke of it again. But sometimes, when Daniel is alone at night, he swears he hears it, the faint sound of a phone ringing and voices whispering just beyond the walls. And somewhere, out there on the forgotten highways, the Silver Pines Motel waits, its neon sign flickering in the dark, ready for the next traveler, too tired to keep driving. Because once you stop there, you never really leave.
Story 3: The Frozen Ascent. Mountains have a way of humbling you. From the ground, they look distant, silent, majestic. But when you're on them, when the air thins in every breath stings, you realize the truth. They don't care if you live or die. And if you're unlucky, you start to feel as if something else up there is watching, waiting for you to misstep. That was the lesson Alex, Marissa, Jordan, and Tyler learned the summer they decided to hike Blackthorn Peak. It was supposed to be an adventure, a week off work, a chance to push themselves, to climb a trail few people dared attempt. They were experienced hikers, though none had gone this high before. Blackthorn Peak wasn't Everest, but it was treacherous, with sudden storms, jagged cliffs, and stories of climbers who never made it back. The locals in the nearby town warned them. At the gas station, an old man filling his truck looked at their gear and shook his head. "Don't go up there," he muttered. "The mountain keeps what it takes." They laughed it off. Every place has its legends, after all. By the time they reached the trailhead, clouds were already gathering. The air was sharp, the forest at the base thick with pine and fog. They set off anyway, packs heavy, spirits high. The first day passed without trouble. The trail wound steadily upward, through trees that grew sparser, the ground dusted with old snow, even in July. At night, they camped in a clearing. The stars overhead were blindingly bright, the silence so complete it pressed against their ears. But around midnight, Marissa awoke to the sound of crunching snow. She sat up, heart racing, listening. Something moved just beyond the edge of the firelight. slow, heavy. She almost called out, but then it stopped. In the morning, she found tracks circling their camp. Not bear, not elk, human. Bare feet pressed deep into the snow. She didn't tell the others. Not yet. The second day, the climb grew harder. The air thinned, every step burning in their lungs. Fog rolled in, thick enough to blur the trail. At times they lost sight of one another, shouting to keep together. That was when Jordan swore he saw someone ahead. A figure, faint through the fog, climbing steadily. Too far to call out, but always just at the edge of sight. But when they pushed harder to catch up, the trail twisted and the figure was gone. That night, the wind howled through the peaks. Their tent shook, the fabric snapping like sails. None of them slept much. And again, in the morning, there were tracks. Bare feet, circling closer. This time, everyone saw them. Maybe another hiker? Tyler suggested weakly. In this weather? Without shoes? Marissa snapped. No one answered. By the third day, the mountain felt wrong. The fog never lifted. Their compasses spun erratically, as if the mountain itself distorted direction. They found themselves doubling back, trails leading nowhere, landmarks shifting when they weren't looking. And always there was the sense of being watched. Once, while crossing a narrow ridge, Alex glanced down and froze. Far below, on a ledge, stood a figure. Thin, tall, head tilted back as if staring straight at him. He blinked, and the ledge was empty. That night, they built their fire high. The shadows beyond it seemed to move, twitching and stretching, never quite still. Around midnight, Tyler awoke to a whisper. He opened his eyes. Marissa was outside the tent, barefoot, walking slowly into the snow. He scrambled out after her, shouting. She didn't turn, didn't react. Her eyes were open but glassy, her lips moving soundlessly. He grabbed her shoulders, shaking her. She blinked suddenly, gasped, and collapsed into his arms. When he asked her what she was doing, she only whispered, "It was calling me." On the fourth day, the storm hit. Snow fell heavy, blinding. The wind screamed through the rocks, icy knives slicing their faces. The trail vanished beneath drifts. They tried to push forward, but every direction looked the same, white, endless. Panic set in. Their supplies were low, their GPS was dead, and the tracks were back. Not just around their camp, all around them, dozens now, bare feet crisscrossing the snow, leading ahead, behind, around. But there were no other hikers. That night, huddled in their tent as the storm battered them, they heard voices, not whispers this time. Clear, human, calling their names. First Alex, then Marissa, then Jordan, then Tyler. Each voice sounded like someone they knew, a parent, a sibling, a lover. When they covered their ears, the voices grew louder. By the fourth morning, Jordan was gone. His sleeping bag lay empty, torn open, snow drifted inside. No footprints led away, just bare prints circling where he had been. They searched for hours, screaming his name, but their voices vanished into the storm. And then Tyler vanished too. One moment he was behind them, the next the fog swallowed him whole, his shout cut off mid-cry, leaving only silence. Panic broke them. Alex and Marissa stumbled blindly, hand in hand, until they collapsed beneath an overhang of rock. That night, the firewood ran out. They huddled together, shivering as shadows gathered at the edge of their vision. Figures stood in the snow, dozens, thin, tall, barefoot, faces pale and blank. When Alex closed his eyes, he heard them moving closer. When he opened them, Marissa was gone. He doesn't remember how he made it down. Days later, a search team found him wandering at the base of the mountain, frostbitten, delirious. He mumbled about voices, about figures in the snow, about his friends being taken. No trace of the others was ever found. The searchers noted something strange, though. The snow around Alex was covered in footprints, hundreds of them, all bare. Locals still warn hikers away from Blackthorn Peak. They say the mountain isn't empty, it's full of every soul it's claimed, wandering barefoot through the snow, waiting for the next to join them. And on quiet nights, when the wind is just right, you can hear them calling your name.
Story 4: The Tides of Black Sand. Vacations are supposed to be escapes, the kind of memories you hold on to when life feels heavy. Laughter, sunburn, the scent of salt water. But sometimes, the places we escape to carry histories darker than the postcards ever reveal. That was what Hannah, Chris, and their friends discovered the summer they rented a beach house along a stretch of coast known by locals as Black Sand Cove. The name alone had made Hannah hesitate when she first saw the listing. But the photos looked idyllic. Smooth, dark shorelines, a house perched above the dunes, the promise of privacy. They'd needed that. A place away from the city, away from noise, away from everything. The first day seemed perfect. They unpacked, grilled on the deck, and swam in the shallows. The sand was dark, yes, but soft and glittering, catching the sun like tiny flecks of obsidian. The waves rolled lazily, warm and inviting. But as evening fell, Hannah noticed something strange. The tide came in fast, too fast. One moment the waterline was yards away, the next it was lapping at their towels. The shift was so sudden it startled them all. By the time they scrambled back toward the house, the beach was nearly gone, swallowed by water that had risen in minutes. Chris laughed it off. Some freak tide, no big deal. But Hannah couldn't shake the sight of it. The water crawling higher, dark and thick, almost oily in the fading light. The second night, the ocean grew louder. Lying awake in bed, Hannah listened as the waves crashed harder and harder, though the weather was calm. Beneath the roar, she swore she heard something else. voices. Not clear, but layered. Dozens of them, carried in the wind, rising with the tide. When she crept onto the deck to listen closer, the voices faded into the surf. But on the sand below, she saw shapes, figures, half submerged, standing in the waves. Too far to see clearly, but their pale outlines swayed with the tide, unmoving, watching. By the third day, things went wrong. Ellie, one of their friends, was walking along the shoreline when she tripped over something buried in the sand. She pulled it free, expecting driftwood. Instead, it was a shoe. Old, leather cracked, but still holding its shape. Inside was a bone. They stared at it in shock before Chris kicked sand over it. Probably washed up from somewhere else, forget it. But that night, Ellie was gone. They found her footprints leading from the deck down to the water's edge, then nothing. No return prints, just a line of steps ending where the tide had risen. The waves that night seemed louder than ever, pounding the shore like fists, and Hannah swore she heard Ellie's voice in them. Panic set in. They wanted to leave, but the road out twisted inland, flooded by sudden, unnatural water that hadn't been there before. Every time they tried, the tide seemed to cut them off. By the fifth night, the beach was unrecognizable. The sand was blacker, slick, almost alive. When they walked across it, it clung to their feet, pulling, dragging like mud. And the voices were constant now, rising with the waves, pleading, calling their names. One by one, the others vanished, pulled from their beds, dragged screaming into the surf. No struggle, no trace left behind but wet footprints leading to the sea. Until only Hannah remained. On the final night, she locked herself in the upstairs bedroom, refusing to sleep. The tide roared outside, shaking the house. Water splashed against the windows, though the room sat well above the beach. And then she heard them, her friends, their voices calling from the waves. "Come with us, Hannah." She pressed her hands to her ears, tears streaming. "You are not real." But when she turned, the room was wet, the carpet soaked, salt water dripping from the ceiling. The window burst inward, a wave crashing into the room, cold and black. Hands rose from it, pale, skeletal, clutching at her arms, her legs, her throat. The last thing she saw was the beach below, glowing faintly as if lit from beneath. Dozens of figures stood along the shore, half buried in the sand, swaying with the tide. Their mouths moved in unison. And then the water pulled her under. The house still stands, though it's been abandoned for years. Locals say no one stays more than a night. On stormy evenings, when the tide rushes in unnaturally fast, people claim to hear voices in the surf. Some say they're the drowned, calling for more. Others whisper that the sand itself is cursed, made from the ashes of those the sea claimed long ago. Whatever the truth, the beach has earned its name, because once the tide rises on Black Sand Cove, it never gives back what it takes.
Story 5. The Carnival That Never Closed. There's something unsettling about carnivals, even in the daylight. The garish colors, the distorted laughter, the too wide smiles painted on signs. But when you stumble onto one in the middle of nowhere, long after it should have shut down, the unease turns into something else, something darker. That was the discovery Liam, Rachel, and Mark made one summer night, when a detour on their road trip led them to a place that shouldn't have been there. They'd been driving for hours, the GPS rerouting endlessly down back roads that didn't seem to exist. By midnight, they were lost, low on gas, and desperate for somewhere to rest. That was when they saw it. Faint neon lights flickering through the trees. A sign arched over an empty dirt lot. "Welcome to Midnight Days Carnival." The paint was peeling, but the bulbs still glowed, buzzing faintly in the dark. The lot was empty, but beyond the gates they could see it all. Rides spinning slowly, booths lit up, music faint on the wind. Rachel frowned. "Isn't it a little late for this to be open?" Mark shrugged. "Maybe it's one of those 24-hour things." But as they passed through the gates, the air grew heavier. The smell of popcorn and cotton candy drifted faintly, though no one was there to serve it. The Ferris wheel turned lazily, its seats swaying, though no one sat in them. And then, faintly, came the sound of laughter. Not cheerful, not bright, hollow, distant. They wandered the midway in silence. The booths were stocked, prizes hanging neatly. A ring toss sat ready, the rings lined in a row. A shooting gallery stood with rifles propped against the counter. But there were no attendants, no crowds. The rides moved on their own. On the carousel, painted horses bobbed up and down, their eyes too lifelike in the glow of the bulbs. The calliope music was warped, dragging, notes bending as if underwater. Rachel shivered. "We shouldn't be here." But Liam was drawn forward. Something about the place pulled at him, as though the carnival were waiting. When he passed the funhouse, the mirrors rippled faintly, reflecting not him, but warped versions of himself. Eyes too wide, mouths stretched in silent screams. He turned away quickly, heart racing. Then they saw the food stand. Popcorn spilled over the counter, candy apples glistened, their red shells sticky. Cups of soda sat sweating in the heat. Rachel reached for one, but Mark grabbed her wrist. "Don't!" She pulled back, trembling. "It smelled so good!" Liam looked around. The midway stretched farther than it should have, lights receding endlessly into the dark. No matter how far they walked, the gates behind them never got closer. The first game booth they passed lit up suddenly, bulbs flashing. A clown mannequin behind the counter jerked upright, its painted grin cracked. Its head tilted slowly, as though it were watching them. A voice boomed from hidden speakers. "Step right up, everyone's a winner." The mannequin's hand twitched. Rachel screamed and they bolted. They ran down the midway, past rides that groaned and spun faster, past stalls where shadows moved just out of sight. The laughter grew louder, echoing from every corner, until it filled the air like a suffocating fog. Finally, they stopped, gasping for breath. Ahead stood the big top. Its striped canvas rose impossibly high, the entrance flaps swaying, though there was no wind. Light glowed from within, pulsing like a heartbeat. Liam felt it pulling him. Before either Rachel or Mark could stop him, he stepped inside. The interior was vast, bigger than it could possibly be. Rows of seats stretched into darkness. The center ring glowed faintly, sawdust damp underfoot. A spotlight clicked on. In the circle stood a figure. A clown. Its makeup was smeared, its costume tattered, but its smile was wide, too wide. "Ladies and gentlemen," it croaked, voice like rusted metal, "tonight's performance is just for you." The spotlight widened, and suddenly the ring wasn't empty. Figures filled it. Performers,
acrobats hanging limp from ropes, jugglers tossing objects that weren't balls, but bones, dancers twirling with empty eye sockets staring from their faces. The crowd roared with laughter, though the seats were empty. The sound pressed down on them, deafening. Rachel grabbed Liam's arm. "We have to go, now!" But the clown stepped closer, tilting its head. Its eyes were pits of black. "You've already bought your tickets. There's no leaving." They ran, through rows of seats, past mirrors that showed them aged, rotting, screaming, through curtains that led not outside but back into the tent, again and again. The carnival shifted around them, the midway stretched, the rides towering, the booths multiplying. Every turn brought them deeper inside, never closer to escape. Mark vanished first. One moment he was ahead of them, the next the ground opened beneath his feet. The floorboard splintered like a trap door, and he fell into darkness. His scream cut off instantly. Rachel and Liam stumbled onward, sobbing, until the Ferris wheel loomed up above them again. Its seats were full now. People sat swaying, pale, lifeless, faces slack. And as the wheel turned, Liam recognized them. Mark, others, dozens of victims, their bodies swaying with each rotation. Rachel screamed, pulling him back. That was when the laughter began again, closer, louder, surrounding them. Shadows closed in, figures emerging from the booths, from the rides, from the tents. Performers, clowns, attendants, all with blank eyes and stretched grins. The carnival had awakened, and it was hungry. No one knows how Liam made it out. Weeks later, he was found wandering an empty highway at dawn, clothes torn, eyes vacant. He never spoke of what happened. Not fully, but when pressed, he whispered one thing: the carnival never closed. Locals still whisper about it. A carnival that appears where the roads are empty, glowing faintly at night. A carnival with no workers, no visitors, just lights, rides, and laughter that doesn't belong. And if you see it, if you hear its call, you're already inside. Because once the carnival chooses you, there is no escape. It never closed, and it never will.